Olive. I'm Kimberly Thomas, owner of Little Olive Clothing Company, a clothing brand for babies and toddlers. I started this channel because I wanted to share some of my different pattern hacks that I've started to do. I have been using a basic tee pattern for peplums, dresses, and lots of other things for many years. So I wanted to show you guys how I did that, as well as hacking a bunch of other patterns. Sometimes I'll mash 2 or 3 different patterns together to get the exact look that I'm looking for, and I wanted to share those tips and tricks with you guys. So today we're going to be starting with using the basic tee pattern and making it into a peplum. The basic tee pattern that I like to use is from Brindille and Twig. I've been using it for many years, but there's lots of other companies that have amazing basic tee patterns as well. So just pick your favorite that you love the sizing of, and that way you can keep sizing consistent throughout all of your different pieces. And let's get started. Okay, so I like to use the Brindille and Twig basic tee pattern, and I'm old school. I still print it out on paper. I know a lot of people like a projector, but here's one reason why I like doing paper is I make my notes right on there. So I know if I'm doing a peplum that I want to cut right here, and that the skirt portion I want to do 8.5 inches, which is going to be enough to give me the full length plus some seam allowance. So here's my 4T. I'm going to make a 4T today shirt pattern. So I'm going to take my fabric. I like to work from the edge. You know, you're supposed to line up the selvages. Sorry, trying to find my grain line. Supposed to all right, it took me a second to find the correct grain line. Now I wanted to tell you guys the way I decided to cut the peplum is about a 1 to 2/3 ratio from the armpit. That's going to be a really pleasing ratio for the eye, but it's also fun to mess around with it and do different lengths. For dresses, sometimes I do a 1-inch bodice and then add on however long I need to make the skirt. Today we're talking about a peplum, so I'll just show you how I did this. Excuse my non-sewing machine, or non-sewing tape measure. So it's 12 inches. So I did about 4 up here, about 8 down here. Like I said, the 8.5 accounts for the seam allowance also. So we're gonna lay that on here. We're just gonna cut down to this, and then we're going to cut the back piece as well. All right, so there's the front bodice. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and cut the second. Let me show you a little trick I like to do. Sorry, this piece of fabric has been well used, and so I've cut off all the selvages, and it's making it a little tricky to find. All right, so I lay the front bodice on. I'm gonna cut it, and I'm just gonna, the only thing I'm gonna do differently is cut the neck on the second piece up here. I have, on occasion, without thinking, cut the front bodice twice. That is a risk you take doing this method, but it's worth it because it saves me the time of having to pin it on again. And I don't have to, because I do paper patterns, I don't have to do a front and back of shirts and stuff that are pretty much the same front and back except for the neckline. So I've cut the neckline. Now, if we were to just, we want to do this as a tank style today. If we were to just leave this and add a binding or a band on here, it would be really like almost just a sleeveless. It wouldn't be tank style. So we're going to cut, I like to cut about 1/2 inch out of the arm side. Kind of get less as you go down to the bottom, but you know, really start out taking a good chunk off at the top. I eyeball that every time, and it always works great. So hopefully that works for you too. Now I'm going to show you a quick thing I like to do. This is one of my trade secrets that whenever people ask me for help, this is one thing I never tell you, but I never tell them, but I'm going to tell you now. I like to go up about 1 inch on the front bodice center and taper it out to the bottom so that when you sew it, just has a little bit You almost won't even notice it, but it just comes up a little bit. I just love the really subtle style that gives it. So there's our 4T front bodice, back bodice, and I'm gonna show you how we gather the skirt onto that. My fail-safe way of gathering. Hope you love it. All right, here we are on the cutting board. You guys, my cutting board is so old and definitely needs to be replaced, but there's too many other fun things to buy in the sewing world. Okay, what we're gonna do is make the bodice, make the skirt for this peplum. I already showed you guys on my pattern piece. I like to do the skirt 8.5 inches long. I measure the bodice. This one is about 6.5. Okay, multiply that by 2 for the full length, which I guess you could have just measured. That'll be 13. And then double that is 26. So we need two 26-inch panels, 8.5 inches long. The reason that I like to do it in 2 different sections, I will show you when we're sewing them on. I like to attach the skirts onto each bodice piece separately. And I think you're gonna really like the result on that. I know it sounds like strange if you've never thought of doing it that way before, but I had a pattern that's how they did it, and it ended up just, I don't want to say changing my life, but it made sewing skirts, gathered skirts onto things so much easier. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and straighten out this piece. Sorry, my tripod doesn't go up high enough to really give you the full view. I'll talk through it. I'm gonna straighten this piece out. And I already measured, this is long enough to do my 2 8.5 inch panels. It's about 18 inches long. So that will give me a little wiggle room to straighten off. See, oh man, I need a new cutting mat because it doesn't go all the way in. Okay, I'll move this down so you can see my numbers. Okay, so I'm at 13.5 and I want 8.5. So I'm gonna go all the way down to 5. Right there. Just make sure that's straight at the top and the bottom. I'm gonna cut all the way across. Now, I do it so that, you know, the greatest amount of stretch is going around the body. But with this gathered skirt, if for some reason you wanted to swap it, let's say you had a stripe going this way and you wanted to swap it so the stripe was going the other way, it's not really gonna matter on a skirt which way the grain line is running. So feel free to play around with, have some creativity in that way. Okay, that's one 8.5 inch panel. It's not 26 inches long yet, but I will adjust that. And now move this guy. Should we just go to 13.5 again? Make it easy. We're gonna go down to 5. Which we are just barely eking it out here on the other end. Always make sure you give yourself that wiggle room. If I would have just done 17 inches, because that's 8.5 times 2, I wouldn't have had the space to really straighten it. Okay, there's our 2 panels that are 8.5 inches long. Now let's do 26 inches wide. I'm gonna move my camera over a little past the 26-inch mark. Okay, now you can do both of these at the same time or you can do them separate. It doesn't really matter. No one will ever know. Okay, I'm gonna lay them both on top of each other. Hopefully speed up the process. Oh, okay, I don't know what happened there. Measured wrong. I made one 9.5, which is good. I'd rather make a mistake going bigger than smaller. So we'll go ahead and cut these off to the 26 mark, throw all of our scraps away, and then I'll take it off camera and fix my mistake. All right, you can't see me. I'm over here cutting on the 0 line. Just trimming off my extra over here, mostly just white edges. All right, so that's that. I'm gonna trim that other piece down to make sure it's 8.5 inches. See, it's a whole inch bigger. All right, and I'll meet you right back. Okay, I fixed that piece. We now have a front bodice, a back bodice, and 2 skirt panels, as well as this long scrap that I have that I'm going to use to make the neck and armbands with. Actually, let's go ahead and show you the armbands. I like to do a 1.5 inch strip. So just like you're cutting your skirt, you want the longest stretch to go the long way around the neck, around the arms. So let's fold it nicely on the grain line. You're getting fabrics. Okay, I went ahead and cut some strips 1.5 inches wide. Let's see if I can show you the grain. You can see the grain line, so it's running opposite to that. The most stretch is going to be this direction. It does have some spandex, so there's a little stretch this way, but most stretch that way. That's the way you want to cut your bands and your binding. Today I'm going to be doing bands. I'll show you binding another time. All right, we're going to sew the gathers on our peplum skirt panels. The first thing I like to do is to find the center. So I'm folding it in half, sorry, to get the, so I'm folding it in half. I'm gonna put a pin. I know there's other ways to mark center. I like to use a pin. Okay, and then I'm gonna turn my machine. This is an old machine, but I'm gonna turn it to the longest stitch possible. It's a straight stitch, and I'm going to adjust my, let's see, where, my tension all the way up to 9. So it's gonna make it kind of tight, and it'll start to gather a little on its own. I'm also gonna reach up and just really lightly put my finger on the spool of thread as it goes, and that will kind of encourage a little more gathering also. All right, now that I have lightly gathered, by the way, I put the basting stitch about 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. My seam allowance is 1/4 inch, so that's going to be visible. I'm going to remove it later. Now I'm going to take my bodice front and back. Let's start with the front piece. Doesn't really matter. Remember, that's I cut that a little bit angled. I'm going to mark that center with a pin. And then we're going to put the 2 centers together. Okay, we're going to gather that just tight enough to match. You guys, this, you're gonna see, this is so much easier than gathering a whole skirt. Being able to gather just 1/4 at a time, because I'm going from, I'm just gathering half of the half, so that's 1/4. So I'm going to gather it until it matches. That's a little, the gathers are a little tighter, so I'm gonna kind of pull them. Then I can just make sure they're nice and even. I can even straighten them a little bit as they're going through my machine. I'm not gonna pin up here. Instead of pinning, I'm just gonna thread it straight into my machine. I'm gonna zip when I get to here, I'm gonna pause, and then I'm gonna gather the other half of this half. So I'm gonna not do it on time lapse. I'm gonna do it in real time for you. Pause right there. I'm almost to my needle. I'm gonna take this part and gently gather from there to the middle. Okay, kind of pull it up, make sure it's, even it out a little bit. I am not super duper concerned with being 100% accurate on something like this, because I don't think it is super obvious in the long run, and it looks perfect. All right, so that's our front bodice completed with the skirt attached. Like I said, I'm going to just remove the Remove the basting stitch. Pull on the one that I was already pulling on so it doesn't lock the stitches in. Okay, now I'll do the other half and I'll take you over to the iron. I'm going to show you how we're going to make that look perfect. All right, we're over here at the ironing board. Now, a lot of times when people do a gathered skirt, they're like, can't figure out why it looks so stretched out around the waist. It doesn't look nice and flat. I'm going to show you it's super easy, especially when you've only done half at a time, to iron your gathers and to make them look so nice and tight, not super stretched out at the waist. Okay, so what you're going to do is pull your gathers down so that the top of the bodice is really smooth and that the gathers are all going straight down. They're not flaring out at all. And I'm going to take my iron. I'm going to, lots of steam. Just really press those good. And then I'll show you when you hold it up, or I guess I'll show you this way. It just looks so much neater. It's going to make a big difference when you get your whole product put together. It's not going to look all stretched out at the waist. All right, I'm going to do the same to the front bodice, and then we'll sew it all together. All right, now I'm going to sew the front and back together just like it was a regular shirt. I'm going to start with my shoulder seams. Then I'm going to work down one side and then to the other side. So I don't use a lot of pins, especially with kids' clothes. It's so small that you can just kind of match up the small space as you go, and then you risk also damaging your serger. You less risk of damaging. Okay, now I'm going to match up here the armpit, bottom of the armpit, match that up. When I slow down, I'm going to make sure that the bodice, see if I'll go a little further so you can see it on camera better. I'm going to make sure that where the bodice seams match up. And then I might dig in a little right here while I sew it, because that way it won't look stretched out around the waistband. Kind of pull those. There we go. See if I can show you. It doesn't. Okay, now I'm just going to do the same thing to the other side. Make sure my bodice seams match up here. See how they kind of poke out? I don't know if it's as obvious, but it kind of pokes out a little bit. I'm going to just cut in so that when you turn it right side out and iron it, it's going to look straight. I just took off about, what is that, like 1/4 of an inch maybe? And then just kind of taper it back to the edge of the fabric. So it doesn't look like I cut in, see? All right, let's turn it right side out and iron it. Okay, turning this right side out. I like to give it an iron before I put the bands on. Then I can do one more press along the skirt. So I just put the peplum down and then kind of use my fingernails to smooth and get the seam turned all the way out. So I'm not leaving, I don't know how you would even describe it. I'm not leaving fabric on the inside. Anyway. Go all the way up to the arm side. Make sure you don't have extra folds tucked underneath. Oh, isn't that looking beautiful? Okay, same thing on the other side. Okay, now we are just gonna add the bands and do the hem. Okay, I pushed my machine back to give us some space. I'm going to show you how I measure the bands for the neckband and the armband. It is different than probably most people do it, but it's my favorite way because it always accounts for the amount of stretch. I cut off that white spot. Okay, I like to fold this is a 1.5 inch strip. I like to fold it in half. Start up at the top of the shoulder, okay, kind of give it a little bit of a seam allowance. Gently stretch it around the neck hole. All the way up there, and pinch. Make sure I'm holding that spot. Go back up to the neck and do the back. Gently stretching. Okay, that's the very end. And then I'm going to give myself just another teeny seam allowance. That way I know how much my fabric is going to stretch and that I kind of want it stretched around the neckband. Okay, then I'm gonna sew that. Let's also do the side seam. I'm gonna set that farther away so they don't get mixed up. Even though the neck hole's generally larger enough that you can tell the difference, but okay, I pull a lot less on the armband. I don't like it to pucker. I want it to just lay really smooth and flat. So I pull less when I'm doing that, pinch right here, and then I just fold it in half because those are going to be the same on either side. Can you see where that line matches up? And then just kind of snip. Then I'm going to go ahead and take another strip of fabric and just match it exactly to this length so that both arms are even. I know this is very non-traditional. A lot of people like to measure and do 80% or 75 or 90, just depending on what look you're going for. But like I said, I like that I can kind of get a feel for the different stretchiness. If you don't like to do it this way, that is totally fine. Just thought you'd want to learn a new possible way. Okay, so I'm going to sew those up and then we're going to serge them onto I'm just going to fold them in half, do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we'll serge them onto the neckband and armband. All right, so I've got my neckband sewn in a loop. I'm going to mark the center front. I like to do the seam in the back, so I mark the center front. I'm going to keep that seam in the back. I know some people like to do it on a shoulder. Your call, but I find this easiest. All right, then we're going to fold and find. I always think when I'm cutting out, wouldn't it be easy? Well, I don't think this when I'm cutting out. I always think I should have clipped this when I was cutting out, but I never remember when I am cutting out. I always think if I would have just put a little like tiny clip that's less than 1/4 inch, I could have marked that. Okay, fold it in half. Put a little pin there. I'm going to open it up and just double check visually. Does it look center? And yes, I'm just going to scooch it over. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's not going to be that little 1/2 millimeter isn't going to make a difference. But anyway, there we go. That looks right to me. I'm going to pin, sorry, holding it up in the air for the camera is not how I normally do it. So if it looks awkward, that's why. Okay, I'm gonna pin the front to the front and then fold this in back. Make sure it's not twisted. Pin it to the back. Now, some people will tell you to 1/4 it. I'm halving it, so you'd mark, you'd mark these two sides and you'd mark where it equally splits up into 4 on your shirt. I don't do that. I'm going to show you why. When I sew this on, I want to stretch it more in the front and less in the back. So I'm going to match it up almost equally in the back and then check here. Am I going to be able to stretch that enough to make it fit? And yes, I am. That way toddlers, especially with bigger heads, they still get a little more space, but the front still gets that nice curve because it's stretched more than the back. Hope that makes sense. Okay, now I'm just gonna start sewing this on. Again, not stretched, I'm stretching a teeny bit in the back, but I'm stretching it a lot along the front curve of the shirt, of the neck hole. I won't speed this up, I'll do it in real time just so you can kind of see. Again, I don't pin there, I just use my machine as the pin, and then I kind of stretch from there. Pull in the back if you need to make it smooth. Again, you're not pulling it, you're just making it taut and letting your machine pull it through. You don't want to mess with the spacing and the speed and stuff of your machine. All right, now we figure out the back. See how that's not, I'm gonna pull it more in the front here. Okay. If you're a beginner and you want to quarter it, no judgment for me. I quartered it for years before I felt comfortable doing this. Okay, this is where I like to insert the tag, and I forgot to have one ready, so I'm going to pause for a second, make a tag, and then I'll come right back and finish sewing that. This is the center back where the little seam is in my neckband. Okay, so now I got my tag. I can do a video on tags another time if you guys would like to see how I print my tags and how I designed them. Heads up, I used to pick monkey and it was rough. I'm not great at it, but I'm happy to share what I know. Okay, I like to go over, I started right here, and I like to go over about 1 inch or 2. Then I snip, and if you kind of pull, you can see 1 or 2 long threads, and if you just tug on them, you don't want to pull so hard you break the thread, but if you pull on them, you kind of tighten it, and it makes a little knot there. I don't know that that's necessary, but that does help so you don't have like random threads kind of hanging off later. I don't think it will come undone, but okay, so you can see how that curve lays really nice there. I'm gonna do the armholes, but I'm gonna half them. They're gonna be equal, and I didn't pull as hard on these because I don't like it to pucker around the arm as much. I like it to lay nice and flat. So I'm gonna do those in fast motion for you, and then we'll hem it. All right, I don't have a cover stitch for now, and if you don't, I love a double needle for my machine. Let's put that in. Oops, let's raise that up a little. There we go. Put that in, and then you thread your machine like normal. One time, put it through the first needle. Then I'm gonna thread again with a second spool of white thread. And go through the second needle. Now for this, I feel like I've seen a lot of people talk about what works best on their machine. You're gonna wanna fiddle probably with your different, for me, the tension on 7, so it's a little tighter. And then I like longest stitch length 4, and then obviously just a straight stitch. Okay, then you can iron and mark this beforehand, but I've been doing it long enough that I feel comfortable eyeballing it. Again, it's not something I usually do in the air though. Okay, I want to fold it about 5/8. I fold it under, and then I line it up with my 5/8 mark, and I start. Make sure that's in the screen. I sewed on my little patch off screen. That's something I can also show you guys on another video, is how I designed and ordered my little brand patches. All right, I just want to show you, I'm getting to the end here. I pull the threads through to the back, all three. I've heard other people backstitch. My machine does not like backstitching with a double needle. So to secure my threads, I pull all three to the back and do a couple square knots. And then I'm gonna stitch over, this is the starting point. I'm gonna stitch over it when I end. I'm gonna overlap about 2 or 3 inches. Then I'm gonna tie off those end threads as well. So let's finish that off. And I like to make it start right here at this is the front. I like to start right on the seam of the front so that when I overlap, or excuse me, I like to start a few inches back so that when I overlap, all of the overlap is on the back of the garment. Okay, I'm gonna pull it out, give myself enough to tie off, and then use my little pin to pull these loops front. Give me a couple square knots here. And that is it. I'm gonna go press this hem, but I will spare you the boring details of that. And that's all. I'll show you a full body shot. All right, and there we have it. Our peplum made with a basic tee pattern. All ready for spring and super cute. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. What else you guys want me to show you? I do a lot with a basic tee, so I have a lot of fun hacks for basic tee, but let me know if you have any requests of dresses or boy clothes. Let me know in the comments, and I would love it if you subscribed. Thanks so much.